So guys, obviously the new Kaleidoscope rework has been in the game for around 2 weeks now, or probably closer to about 10 days as I'm recording this. And today I essentially just wanted to jump on and kind of talk through my opinion on the changes to the map. Not only how I feel about those changes, but essentially just discussing whether or not this is actually worth the wait. Obviously we have known about this for probably like 3 to 4 months now, if not even longer than that. And so yeah, there is a lot of different discussion points there and I wanted to jump straight into that. Before we do get into it, if you guys do enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is going to be plenty more Battlefield 2042 content on the way, but with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So I think quickly to just kind of summarize my thoughts on the actual changes to the map overall before getting into, whether or not it was worth waiting that, 3 to 4 month period. I do definitely have to admit that the changes to the map definitely make the map feel better. It has made the map a little bit more enjoyable to play now, and I do think that it's probably sort of, skyrocketed this to probably one of the best base 2042 maps in the game. Obviously none of them, in my opinion anyway, come close to Exposure. Exposure is by far the best map in the game right now, but for me Kaleidoscope was probably down closer to the bottom on that list of the vanilla maps, and honestly these changes have probably made it go a lot closer to the top. It's not quite at the top there, but yeah, I do think the changes are decent, and at the end of the day they have improved the map. Now I think there are definitely certain areas where it kind of feels like it flows better. I think B1 and B2, the area over there that's a little bit more like grassy, and it's obviously now had a lot of terrain changes, and there's a lot more like deviation in the terrain as well as a lot more rocks and all that kind of thing. That area over there is definitely a big improvement on what it used to be, because it was essentially just very flat. There was a massive lack of cover. There was barely any like rocks or bushes or anything like that in the way. There was just little bits scattered here and there, maybe like a tree out in the middle of the field, and that was essentially it. Whereas now it does definitely feel like it is actually designed to have some sort of flow to it where you can move across that area without just getting absolutely peppered from essentially every single direction. So I do think that area in particular has been improved a hell of a lot, and that is a really fun area anyway. Even when it was poorly designed, that was a pretty fun area of the map. It's also like a really nice looking area of the map too, so it's an area that I do spend a lot of time in, and obviously now that those changes have been made, I do like that area even more. Now obviously there were also changes made to that sort of central building as well as the G and F flag, so essentially where the tower section is. In terms of the central building, personally I don't really feel like that has changed at all. Obviously there are little bits of extra cover sort of scattered around the outside of it, so I'm not going to say it's worse or anything like that. It's definitely improved, but it doesn't feel drastically different than it did beforehand. So for me that area kind of just gets a bit of a pass mark. It's nothing crazy, but yeah, it is still an improvement. However, the G and F flags, they definitely do feel very much improved, not only on the flags themselves, so essentially like inside the buildings or up on top of the buildings, but also essentially those areas around the outside. And I would say particularly the area between the skyscrapers and that central building. Running between those areas now, it does feel like there's a lot more cover. So I think all of those areas, which are obviously the areas that they kind of focused on, the areas that they showed us in all of the concept art and all that kind of stuff, those areas are definitely better, and I think they do flow a hell of a lot better. Now with all of those positives though, the one thing I will say is that I guess the map as a whole does still feel pretty similar to how it felt beforehand. So it's not like the changes to this map have made it feel like a completely different map and it's like a brand new piece of content. It does still feel pretty similar to how it did. It's just essentially improved slightly in the areas where it was really lacking. So although those individual areas are definitely improved, I don't think the map as a whole is like drastically improved. The way that I've described it on the Battlefield Show podcast, which if you guys aren't aware of, I'm the co-host on that, and I'll leave the links to that in the description, so be sure to go and check that out. But the way I've described it on that is essentially like if this map was I would probably rate it as a 6 out of 10 beforehand, for example. These changes have probably taken it to, maybe a 6.5, maybe a 7 on the generous side, but I don't think I would go quite as far as saying it's as good as a 7 out of 10 just yet. And so yeah, it is still an improvement, and I'm not going to complain about that. I do think that the changes are good, and the map is essentially just better than it was. So it's definitely an improvement, but for me, it's not like it's taken it from a 6 to a 9 out of 10, for example. It's still pretty much the same map that it was beforehand. Now, the main thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is essentially just like whether that was actually worth the wait. Obviously, like I said, we have known about this for I think 3 to 4 months, maybe even longer than that, to be honest. It might have even been all the way back in like Feb or something crazy like that when they first announced they would be, reworking the maps. And so yeah, the question is, was that worth the wait? Obviously, it's only been one map in that time, and we are getting the renewal changes in, I guess, a month, maybe 2 months, depending on how that goes. But that is a long time to wait for essentially some some very small changes to the map. Now, I kind of have two different answers as to whether I think it was worth the wait, and that depends on whether this is taking away from future content. So something else that we've discussed on the podcast is essentially just like what team is working on this content. So if this is the same team, for example, that is making future maps, so they've had to take away, let's just say for an easy example, they have taken 10 developers who are working on future content and they've taken them and put them on a team that is now working on these changes. If that is taking away from future content, because obviously that, if you take 10 from that team that's making the next map in the game, that map is going to be less developed and it's going to have less time, or I should say less people working on it in order to fix the previous maps that are already in the game. And if that is the case, personally, I don't actually think this is worth it, and I don't think they should redo all of the maps in the game like they're mentioning, simply because I don't think that is actually worth the trade-off. For me, future content is the only thing that's essentially keeping me hanging on to this game at the moment. After they released Exposure and I saw how good the map actually is and how they kind of showed they can still make really solid maps when they have the time to work on them, if they're now essentially taking some of those people who are working on that content and taking them to work on the content that they should have gotten right in the first place, for me that is actually not worth it, and I kind of just wish that they would take those people back and put them on the future content and just leave the vanilla maps how they are, because like I said, these changes are all really solid and they do objectively make the map better, but I don't think they're making them better to the extent that it's actually worth taking away from that future content, for example. Now, on the flip side of that, obviously we don't know who's working on what, so there is every chance that the people who are working on, say, the people that worked on the kaleidoscope changes and then now the renewal changes, there's every chance that they are just nothing to do with the future content. And if that is the case, then I think my answer to this question is definitely very different, because I think if that is a completely different team, then I do think this is worth the wait, because if they can get all of those base 7 maps to be in the state that Kaleidoscope's in, where yeah, it's still not the perfect map and it's not the best Battlefield map we've ever had, but it is definitely better and it's a lot more like detailed and there's more cover and it just flows a little bit better. If they can do that to all 7 of the other maps without actually taking away from future content, then personally I really do think that is worth the wait. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a hard one to answer, because I have just, essentially I'm just sitting on the fence there. I don't actually know which developers are working on which thing, so obviously it is impossible to tell. But as good as these changes have been, if the developers are being taken away from working on future content to go and fix this stuff, I actually am probably in the minority here that I don't think these changes are actually worth doing. So it's a bit of a tough one, and unfortunately I don't think we'll ever really find out how that actually works. Obviously game development is always kept pretty secretive with this kind of thing. It's obviously just never going to get out there as to whether they are taking people off future content and all that kind of thing. So unfortunately I don't think we'll ever find the answer to this, but it is something that is just worth discussing anyway, in my opinion. And the main reason I wanted to bring it up as well is mostly just to get your thoughts down below, because I think there has been some pretty mixed opinions on these updates. I don't think anyone has really said this is bad content they're making, the maps are worse or anything like that. I think everyone kind of agrees that the maps are definitely better, or the map I should say is definitely better than it was beforehand. But I have also seen a lot of people kind of saying the same thing as me, where it's like, is this worth waiting, somewhere between I guess 4 to 6 months to get a 10-20% better map, when the maps are so poorly designed from the get-go that they're still not very good when you actually make those changes. So like I said, I'm very keen to hear your thoughts down in the comments, and be sure to leave your thoughts down below. We are obviously getting the renewal changes in what seems to be a month, maybe less than that now, and so once we have multiple different maps that have been changed, maybe my opinion will change. But as of right now, it is definitely hard to tell, and I do think that if this is actually taking this long, and these people could be working on new weapons, or at least working on the new maps and stuff like that, then yeah, I actually am not sure that this is really worth the actual effort going into it. So like I said, leave your thoughts down below. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like down below. If you're new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button, and if you want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.